The wind screams like a living thing. 2:19 in the morning. The snow-covered doors of Ashford Mountain Lodge burst open, and a woman stumbles through into the firelit darkness. Aria Hartley. 27 years old but looking like the world had aged her by decades. Her auburn hair is plastered to her pale face with melted snow and sweat. Blood drips from her split lip onto the worn wooden floorboards. A handprint bruise darkens across her throat, purple and angry, the size of a man's grip. Her cheap waitress uniform is torn at the shoulder, exposing scratches that run like a map of violence down her arm. She collapses near the stone fireplace. The scent of burning pine fills the air, mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Her entire body shakes, not from the cold alone, but from something deeper, something that lives in the nervous system after terror has visited. A man is tending the fire. Nicholas Castellano. 38 years old. Charcoal sweater, dark jeans, the kind of casual wealth that costs more than most people's annual salary. His face is carved from marble, strong jaw, high cheekbones, dark eyes that miss nothing. A thin scar runs from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade mark. He freezes mid-motion, poker iron suspended above the flames. Two men in black tactical gear stand near the entrance. Enzo and Franco. Both in their 40s, both moving with the economy of motion that comes from a lifetime of violence. Their hands move instinctively toward concealed weapons. The howling blizzard rattles the windows like something trying to break through. Nicholas's dark eyes take in every injury with lethal focus. The torn uniform. The scratches. The bruise on her throat shaped exactly like fingers. He moves toward her, and both his men tense. "Don't," he says, his voice low and solid like an oath. His gaze never leaves her face. She tries to speak. Her lips move but only a whisper escapes, cracked and desperate. "Please, my daughter, she's in the car outside. Emma, she's only 7, she's so cold, I had to get help, I had to." She collapses fully now, her body giving up what her mind has been fighting against. Her fingers clench around the edge of the fireplace hearth. Tears stream down her face, mixing with blood from her split lip. Nicholas drops to one knee beside her. Up close, he can see the entire story written across her skin. The handprint. The torn fabric. Her trembling shoulders. Something cold and dangerous stirs in his chest, not anger, but the kind of rage that thinks in strategies, that calculates consequences in blood. "What is your name?" he asks quietly. "Aria," she whispers. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here, I didn't know where else to go, he said he would find us," he said, her words fracture. She cannot finish. Nicholas looks at Enzo without moving his head. The gesture is minimal, almost invisible, but Enzo understands. He moves toward the door. "Get her daughter inside." Carefully. Warm blankets. The guest room on the east wing, fireplace already burning. His voice carries no negotiation. She sees no one. "You understand me?" "Yes, boss," Enzo says, and he is gone into the blizzard. Franco remains, watching this impossible thing unfold. In 15 years of working for Nicholas Castellano, he has never seen him kneel beside anyone like this. Has never heard his voice modulate into gentleness. Franco's hand stays near his weapon, not because he thinks she is a threat, but because he is witnessing something he does not understand, and his instinct is to protect. Nicholas reaches into the pocket of his sweater and pulls out a handkerchief. White. Expensive. He presses it against her bleeding lip with incredible gentleness. "You are safe now," he says. "No one is going to hurt you. No one is going to touch you. Do you understand?" She nods, unable to speak. Her whole body continues to shake like a leaf in a storm that will not end. But what she does not know, what none of them know in this moment, is that hours earlier, in a grocery store parking lot 6 blocks away, her 7-year-old daughter had already saved this man's entire world without understanding what she was doing. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment changes everything. Before we continue, If this story hits you in the heart, drop a like right now. Your like is fuel for us to keep creating these stories that matter. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. The next part of what happened is even more stunning. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us travel 6 hours earlier to a grocery store parking lot where a little boy stood alone in the freezing snow. The clock on the dashboard read 8:45 in the morning. Aria Hartley pulled her 2008 Honda Civic into the food barn parking lot in downtown Boston, and her hands were shaking for reasons that had nothing to do with the November cold. She sat still for a moment, both hands gripping the steering wheel, and counted the bills in her head one more time. $5. That was all she had left. $5 in her wallet. 43 cents in her savings account. 7 days until rent was due. $212 until she could not pay it. She had worked a double shift yesterday, 18 hours straight on her feet, and the dinner crowd had left her exactly $9.60 in tips. $9.60 for serving 23 tables. She had walked out with $8, after she left $1 for the bus driver. Then she had bought Emma's lunch for school today, and now there was $5 left to feed herself and her daughter for 7 more days. The math did not work. It never worked anymore. She opened the car door. The cold hit her like a blade wrapped in ice. Her breath came out in white clouds. She was wearing a coat she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago, navy blue, missing 2 buttons, the hem coming loose on the left side. Underneath it was her waitress uniform from the Ashford Lodge, where she worked nights. The uniform was polyester, designed to look professional, designed to make customers feel like they were being served by someone competent and whole. It did neither for her anymore. It was just cloth, worn thin and faded. She reached the back seat and unbuckled Emma's car seat. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Emma said. She was 7 years old, with her mother's auburn hair and eyes the color of summer sky. Her voice was patient, the way 7-year-olds are patient when they have learned not to ask for things they cannot have. "I know, baby. We're going to get some food right now." Aria took her daughter's hand. It was small and cold inside her palm. "We're getting your favorite cereal. The one with the little strawberries in it." It was the store brand. 49 cents cheaper than the regular kind. Emma did not know the difference. They walked into the grocery store. The fluorescent lights were harsh and bright, and they made Aria's eyes water. She kept her head down, the way she had learned to keep her head down, moving through the world like a ghost that people did not quite see. An invisible woman walking an invisible child through an ordinary Tuesday morning. The problem with being invisible is that nobody notices when you are breaking. Aria had been breaking for longer than she could measure. She broke when the hospital bill came for Emma's ear infection, $4,280. She had no insurance. She broke when the apartment building had the fire inspection and the landlord decided to raise rent by $300 a month. She broke every time Emma asked for new shoes and her current ones still had holes in them, but at least they fit. She broke in small ways, every single day, like a person stepping on ice that is getting thinner. She picked up the cereal. She grabbed a bag of rice. 2 cans of beans. A block of generic cheese. A loaf of bread. She was calculating as she moved, the numbers running constant like a calculator with no off switch. Rice was good for 6 meals. Beans were protein. The cheese would last a week if she rationed it. Bread for lunches for Emma's school. For $1.73 so far. She had time to add one more thing. Eggs. 12 eggs for $1.89. That would give them protein for breakfast. That was important. A growing child needed protein. She got in line at the checkout. The woman ahead of her had a cart full of things, fresh vegetables, organic milk, cereal that was probably $5 a box. The woman did not count. She did not calculate. Money was just something that existed for her, the way air exists for everyone. Aria felt something bitter twist in her chest, and she pushed it down. Bitterness was a luxury. She could not afford luxuries. "That'll be $5.84, the cashier said. Her stomach sank. $5.84. She had $5. She said. Her face burned. "Can you take off the eggs?" The cashier sighed. A long sigh that communicated 1,000 things, that she did this 10 times a day, that she did not want to see this, that the world was full of people who did not have enough and it was exhausting to bear witness to. She removed the eggs. $5 and the register beeped. $5.03. Aria pulled out her 5 ones. They were soft from being handled. She placed them on the counter with as much dignity as she could, which was very little, because dignity is hard to hold on to when you are $1 short. "I'm a penny short," she said quietly. A man's voice came from behind her in line. "I've got you." She turned. The man was in his 50s, wearing work clothes, a plaid shirt under a puffy jacket. He was holding a penny out to her with a small, kind smile. Not pitying. Just kind. Just human. "Thank you," she whispered, and she meant it in a way that went deeper than the penny, meant it for acknowledging her existence, meant it for not making her feel like she was nothing. She took Emma's hand and walked out into the November cold with 2 bags of groceries that would not be enough, and a daughter who was brave about not having enough, and $5 gone. That was at 8:57 in the morning. At 9:15, everything changed. Emma had asked to play in the parking lot for 5 minutes while Aria loaded the groceries into the car. Just 5 minutes. She was a good child. She stayed close. She did not run into traffic. Aria stood by the open car door and watched her daughter move through the rows of parked vehicles, pretending the parking lot was a forest, pretending the shopping carts were deer. A small boy stumbled between the cars. He was maybe 6 years old. Dark hair. Expensive coat, the kind of coat that cost more than everything Aria owned. He was alone. Crying. Looking around like the world had suddenly become too large and too loud. Emma stopped walking through her forest. She watched him. Then she walked toward him. "Why are you crying?" Emma asked. The boy's lip trembled. "I cannot find my daddy. He let go of my hand in the store and I do not know where he went." He was terrified. A small child terrified in a parking lot full of strangers. Emma was 7. She understood terrified. "You have to stay with someone so you don't get lost more," Emma said. It was the logic of a child, simple and absolute. "I will stay with you until we find him." Aria watched from across the parking lot, her heart suddenly moving very fast. She had taught Emma to stay away from strangers. She had taught her the rules. But Emma, this small girl, had decided that the rules were less important than the fact that this boy was afraid and alone. Emma took the boy's hand. They walked back toward where Aria was standing, and Emma was explaining to him about the parking lot forest and how they were safe now because she was there and she would not let go. The boy was still crying, but he was nodding, listening to her small voice in the vast parking lot. Aria knelt down to their level. "What is your name?" she asked the boy gently. "Marco," he said in a voice like breaking glass. "My name is Marco Castelliano and I want my daddy." Behind Aria, 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot, moving fast. She did not hear them arrive. She only felt it, the temperature dropping, the air changing, the way the world shifts when something powerful enters it. 10 men in suits got out of those vehicles. Not walking. Moving with purpose. Their eyes scanning. Their bodies tense. One man emerged from the center SUV, and the world seemed to pause around him. He was tall. Over 6 feet. His suit was charcoal gray and fit him like it had been painted onto his body by someone who understood that clothing on a man like this was armor. His coat was cashmere, worth more than Aria's car. His dark hair was swept back from his face, and there was a scar running from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade mark. His face was beautiful in the way that things that can destroy you are beautiful, terrible and perfect and dangerous. His eyes found the boy. The entire world stopped turning. The November wind tore through the parking lot like a blade wrapped in ice. 8 o'clock in the evening. The blizzard had arrived ahead of schedule, turning the Boston grocery store lot into a white wasteland where visibility dropped to nothing, where cars became shadows, where sound itself seemed swallowed by the falling snow. Aria Hartley stood in that whiteness, holding 2 paper grocery bags that were beginning to soak through, holding her 7-year-old daughter Emma's small hand in her other palm. Aria was 29 years old but looked older, the kind of older that comes from counting pennies, from double shifts, from choosing between heat and food. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical braid. Her coat was navy blue and thin, inadequate for a Boston November. Her eyes were brown and tired in a way that suggested sleep had become something other people experienced. Under her fingernails, dirt that no amount of scrubbing would remove. Calluses on her palms from the kitchen at the Blackwood Hotel. A small scar on her left temple from an accident 3 years ago that she would not discuss. She had $5 in her pocket. That was all. $5 in crumpled bills, and they needed to last until Friday. Today was Wednesday. Friday was 3 days away and felt like a century. Emma tugged at her sleeve. Not gently. Emma had learned early that gentle did not work when you needed your mother's attention. Emma had learned to tug hard. Mommy. Mommy, look. Keep your eyes forward, baby. The wind is too cold. But there is a boy. Aria did not look. She could not afford to look at every displaced person, every lost thing. She had been taught that by life itself, a hard education delivered over 7 years of single motherhood and insufficient income and choices that had no good options, only less bad ones. Emma tugged again. Harder. Aria looked. 30 feet away, standing alone beside a black SUV, was a small boy. Age 6, maybe 7. He wore a white shirt with the cuffs rolled up. No coat. No hat. No shoes except dress shoes that were completely inadequate for a blizzard. His lips were already pale. His skin was the color of winter itself. He was crying without sound, shoulders shaking, mouth open, tears freezing on his cheeks before they could fall. Aria kept walking. Emma's hand pulled backward, against the weight of momentum, against the force of her mother's determined forward movement. Mommy, he is cold. We do not have time. Mommy. Emma. The word was soft but it carried weight. The word was a boundary. Aria had learned to draw these boundaries because without them, she would have given away the $5 long ago. Without them, she would have surrendered what little remained. Without them, she would have become invisible, not just to the world, but to herself. Emma was silent. But her hand did not relax. They walked 20 more feet through the snow that crunched under Aria's shoes, wet and heavy. The paper bags were coming apart. She could feel the waterlogged cardboard softening in her hands. Milk inside. Bread. The cheapest cheese. The generic brand pasta that cost 93 cents per box. Emma stopped walking. Completely. Her small body became immovable. I am not leaving him alone, Emma said. Her voice was not loud. It was steady. It carried the kind of certainty that children sometimes possess before the world teaches them to calculate. Before they learn to count the cost of kindness. Aria looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. Emma had the same auburn hair that Aria had, inherited from a father Emma would never know, braided the same way, pulled back from a face that was all determination. Emma's eyes were dark and serious. Emma's coat was also thin. Emma's shoes were worn through at the heel. Emma was 7 years old and already understood loss, already grasped suffering, already recognized it in others. Aria turned around. The boy was still standing there. His small chest was heaving with cold. His eyes were red and swollen from crying. His white dress shirt was soaked. His fingers were turning blue at the tips. Aria walked back toward him. As she approached, the boy did not move toward her. Instead, he pressed his palm flat against his chest twice, very deliberately. Then he pointed toward the dark woods beyond the parking lot's edge. A gesture specific and intentional. A signal designed for someone in particular, someone who had taught it to him, someone who would understand. The boy's name was Luca Castelliano. He did not know that his father had taught him this signal as insurance, as a last resort, as a language carved into his small body that meant danger, true danger, the kind that requires immediate response. But Aria did not understand. She only understood that a child was freezing and alone. "What is your name?" she asked, kneeling down so she was at his level, so her eyes were not above him but parallel. So she was not an authority figure descending but a human at human height. "Luca," the boy whispered. His voice was barely audible above the wind. His voice was the sound of ice cracking. "Where is your mommy and daddy?" Luca's face crumpled. Not gradually. All at once. The way a structure collapses when the support is removed. His chest convulsed with crying that had been building, that had been contained as long as his small body could contain it. Emma sat down in the snow beside him. Just Saturday. Did not speak. Did not try to comfort with words. Just sat there, her thin legs bent underneath her in the snow, her hand reaching out until her small fingers touched his small fingers. "You are okay," Emma said. "I am here now. I will not leave." Aria set the grocery bags down in the snow. They were already ruined. She pulled Luca against her body, trying to give him warmth from her inadequate coat, trying to transfer what little heat she had left. His entire frame was trembling. His teeth were chattering so hard she could hear it. She looked at Emma. Emma was still sitting beside him, still holding his hand, still refusing to leave. "Come," Aria said. She picked Luca up. He weighed almost nothing. She carried him back toward the grocery store, Emma walking alongside them, her small hand still holding his. The automatic doors slid open and they stepped into climate control and fluorescent light and the smell of industrial cleaners. The store was nearly empty at this hour. A cashier looked up from her register, taking in the sight of this woman with 2 children, all of them soaked with melting snow, the child in her arms shaking so badly his teeth were audible. "I need to use your phone," Aria said. "Please." "There is an emergency." The cashier, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, gestured immediately toward the service desk. "There is a phone. You call who you need to call." Aria dialed the police. She gave them her location. She described the boy, his clothes, his approximate age, the fact that he had been abandoned in a blizzard. She provided her name. She said she would wait. She said she would keep the child warm until help arrived. She did this while Emma continued to sit on the floor beside Luca, her small hand still holding his, her 7-year-old voice continuing to speak in low, steady tones about parking lots and safety and the fact that she would not leave. The phone call that Aria made at 8:17 in the evening reached the police dispatcher in Boston. The dispatcher, trained in protocol, entered it into the system. The system flagged a missing person report that had been filed 6 hours earlier. A child. Age 6. Luca Castelliano. Last seen leaving a private car service at 2 in the afternoon. Parents deceased. Guardian, Nicholas Castelliano, Boston resident, currently unlocatable. That report moved through channels. It moved from the dispatcher to a precinct. It moved from a precinct to a man named Franco, who was sitting in a black SUV parked outside a warehouse on the harbor, waiting for instructions from his boss. Franco was 42 years old with gray threading through his black hair and a scar along his jaw that came from a knife fight in 1998. He had been working for Nicholas Castelliano for 17 years. In 17 years, Franco had learned to read silence the way other people read books. Franco had learned that his boss's emotions moved like weather systems, sudden, powerful, impossible to predict. Franco's phone rang. He answered on the first ring. It was the dispatcher. "We have a report. A child matching the description of Luca Castelliano." He was found unattended in a grocery store parking lot approximately 6 miles northeast of the city. He is alive. He is being held by a civilian pending officer arrival. The civilian's name is, the dispatcher checked the report, Aria Hartley. Franco's hand went to the dashboard. He gripped it until his knuckles turned white. 17 years of protocol demanded that he relay this information through proper channels. 17 years of loyalty demanded something else. He called Nicholas directly. The phone rang 3 times. Nicholas answered without greeting. Report. Sir, we have a location. Luca. He is safe. He was found by a woman and her daughter in a parking lot. They called police. He is alive. There was silence on the line. Complete, total silence. Franco could hear nothing except breathing, his own breathing, irregular and anxious, and something else, something that might have been the sound of his boss's hand hitting a wall, or his boss's body sliding down a wall, or his boss coming apart in a way that 17 years of loyalty had never witnessed. When Nicholas spoke again, his voice was different. Where? Franco gave the location. I am sending Enzo. He will retrieve Luca. He will also retrieve the woman and her daughter. I want them brought to the lodge. I want them safe. I want them protected until I understand what happened and why a child of mine was abandoned in a blizzard and why a stranger chose to stand in snow with him instead of walking away. Franco understood the weight of that command. He understood that something had shifted. He understood that this woman, Aria Hartley, whoever she was, had just become important in a way that only a handful of people in Boston were important. Meanwhile, 90 miles north, at the Blackwood Mountain Lodge, Aria was completing her arrival. She had driven through the blizzard in her 1998 Honda Civic, a car that had 207,000 miles on its odometer and made sounds that suggested imminent mechanical failure. Emma slept in the back seat, her head against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Aria had dropped Luca with the police officers. She had watched them take him, had made sure they understood his name, had given them her information. She had driven away knowing that she had done what she could, that she had spent perhaps 4 hours in total on this child, that the $5 in her pocket had become $4.83 after she had bought Luca hot chocolate at the store's cafe. The lodge appeared through the snow like something from a fairy tale, all dark wood and stone and enormous windows glowing with firelight. Cordelia Blackwood owned it. Cordelia Blackwood was wealthy in the way that some people are wealthy, inheritance money mixed with calculated cruelty, with business practices that existed in grey areas, with a foundation built on other people's desperation. Aria parked in the employee lot. She woke Emma gently. We are here, baby. You sleep inside the car. I will be working all night. You sleep until I come back. Emma nodded, already half unconscious. The car was warm and dry and that was enough. Aria walked through the blizzard toward the kitchen entrance. She wore an apron that had been white once. Her shoes were soaked. Her fingers were still numb from the parking lot, from holding a small boy while he cried, from sitting in snow beside a stranger's child. The kitchen was warm and bright and smelled like beef stock and industrial salt. Douglas Hale was there. Douglas Hale was the manager of the hotel's kitchen operations. He was 56 years old and handsome in the way that men who have never been told no are handsome, convinced of his own power, his own importance, his own right to take what he wanted. He saw Aria come through the door and his eyes tracked her the way a predator tracks movement. You are late, he said. His voice was not loud. His voice was conversational. This was somehow worse. The blizzard, Aria said. I had to help someone. Your responsibility is here. Not to strangers. Aria said nothing. She tied her apron. She began her work. She chopped vegetables. She prepared mise en place for the overnight kitchen. She moved through the space like a ghost, like someone who had learned to make herself smaller, less noticeable, less present. What she did not know was that she had just placed her daughter in a car in the parking lot of a hotel owned by a woman named Cordelia Blackwood, who was about to receive very specific instructions from a very dangerous man named Nicholas Castellano. What she did not know was that the man she was avoiding in the kitchen would soon discover that he had made a profound and irrevocable mistake, and that mistake would cost him everything. What she did not know was that one hand reaching out at the right moment can change an entire life. The kitchen was empty except for the sound of her breath and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps trapped in plastic. Aria Hartley wiped down the stainless steel counter for the third time, her movements mechanical, practiced, invisible. The industrial space smelled like bleach and old grease and the ghost of 1,000 meals prepared by people no one would ever thank. Outside the service entrance windows, the blizzard had turned into something prehistoric, wind howling against the glass like a living thing trying to get in. She didn't hear him approach. That was the worst part. Douglas Hale moved like a man who'd never learned that other people deserved warning. He was 56 years old but dressed like someone 10 years younger, tailored charcoal shirt open at the collar, gold watch visible on his wrist, the kind of watch that cost more than the rent Aria paid for their studio apartment 3 blocks away. His hair was slicked back with something that caught the fluorescent light. His smile was the smile of someone who had never been told no. "Working late again, Aria," he said. His voice was conversational. That was somehow worse than if he'd shouted. "You know, I could make your shifts easier. Better tips. Better hours. You wouldn't have to scramble so hard." She felt her shoulders pull up toward her ears. "Mr. Hale, I need to finish the cleaning." "I'm talking to you." He moved closer. The space between them collapsed like a door slamming shut. "A woman like you, working this hard, raising a daughter alone. That takes strength. That takes determination." Aria backed against the counter. The edge pressed into the small of her back. "Thank you for saying that, but I really should." "For months." His voice dropped, became something else entirely. Something with teeth. "For months I've been patient. For months I've noticed you. For months you've been turning me down." She tried to step sideways. He moved with her, blocking the path to the door. His hand reached out and wrapped around her wrist. The grip was not hard enough to break bone. It was hard enough to prove he could if he wanted to. "Do you know how many single mothers would kill for your job?" His fingers tightened. "Do you understand what you have? What I could take away?" Aria tried to pull her arm back. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Outside, the wind scratched at the windows. He raised his other hand and struck her across the face. The sound was small but definite, like a piece of ice cracking on a frozen lake. Her head snapped sideways. Pain exploded through her left cheekbone. She tasted blood, her own blood, salt and copper, warm on her tongue. She stumbled backward. Her hip hit the metal prep table. An aluminum tray fell to the floor with a crash that echoed through the kitchen like a scream. His hand found her throat. The pressure came suddenly. One moment she could breathe. The next moment the world narrowed to the sensation of his palm pressing against her windpipe, his fingers spreading across the delicate skin of her neck. She couldn't scream. The sound caught somewhere deep in her chest and died there. "You are not going to talk to anyone," he said, his voice still calm, still conversational. "You understand? You go to your manager, you go to corporate, you go to the police, nobody is going to believe a nobody waitress. Not over me. Not over my reputation. You'll lose this job. You'll lose everything. Your daughter will go hungry." He released her. His hand fell away like he'd simply lost interest. She gasped, her throat burning, her lungs desperate for air that came in ragged, painful pulls. He straightened his shirt. He checked his watch like he'd just completed a minor task. "Finish your work," he said, and he walked out through the service entrance, leaving her collapsed against the counter, trembling like something hunted. Aria's fingers went to her throat. The damage was already there, already darkening, the outline of his hand, a perfect map of violence pressed into her skin. She looked down at her reflection in the stainless steel counter. Her lip was split. Blood dripped onto the shiny surface, one drop, then another, then several more, spreading like a confession. She was nobody. That was what he'd said, and it was true in a way that went deeper than just her job. She was a woman with $5 in her pocket and 72 hours until her next paycheck. She was a woman with no family, no support system, no safety net. She was a woman whose daughter slept in the employee break room because childcare cost more than she made in 2 weeks. She was invisible. She was disposable. She was exactly the kind of woman that men like Douglas Hale hunted because they knew no one was looking. But Aria Hartley had a daughter named Emma, and Emma was not disposable. She moved through the kitchen on autopilot, finishing her work, her hands shaking so badly that she nearly dropped a stack of plates. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow in her peripheral vision felt like a threat. By the time she clocked out, it was nearly midnight. The blizzard had worsened. The wind had a voice now, something between a howl and a scream. She walked to the employee break room where Emma slept on a cot under a thin blanket, curled into a ball like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. She was 7 years old and already so good at being invisible. Aria scooped her up carefully, wrapping their only blanket around both of them, and carried her out into the December night. The parking lot was a white wilderness. Visibility was maybe 30 feet. Wind tore through the open space like something with claws. Aria moved toward her car, a 2009 Honda Civic that had been struggling for 6 months, its battery fading slowly, like something dying by degrees. She'd meant to get it replaced. She'd meant to have enough money for a lot of things. Emma stirred but didn't wake as Aria buckled her into the back seat. Her daughter's lips were slightly parted, her expression peaceful, untouched by the knowledge of what had just happened, what was still happening, what would keep happening if Aria didn't do something. She turned the key. The engine turned over once. Twice. The third time it simply stopped. Aria sat in the darkness and cold and tried again. Nothing. The battery was completely dead. She tried for more times, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white, and each time the silence that followed the failed ignition felt like a door closing on her options. The temperature inside the car began to drop almost immediately. Outside, the blizzard raged. Aria looked at her phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. The mountain lodge was built in a dead zone, something the owner bragged about, total privacy, complete isolation, a place where the wealthy could disappear from the world. She made a decision. She gathered Emma in her arms, wrapped the blanket around her daughter like it could protect her from the truth of their situation, and stepped back out into the snow. The cold was immediate and absolute. It invaded through every gap in her clothing, every exposed inch of skin. Emma weighed maybe 50 pounds, but after 10 minutes of walking, she felt like she weighed 1,000. The drifts came up to Aria's thighs. Her shoes filled with snow. Her lungs burned with each breath of air so cold it felt like inhaling broken glass. The guest entrance was closer than the employee entrance, and Aria was terrified of running into Douglas in the kitchen. She stumbled toward the lights of the lodge, blood from her split lip freezing on her chin, her body moving on instinct alone. Emma remained asleep, impossibly, through it all. The doors came closer. The light inside grew brighter. At 2:19 in the morning, with a blizzard raging and her body at the edge of something fatal, Aria Hartley collapsed through the entrance of the mountain lodge's guest wing. The fireplace was still burning. Someone had kept it fed all night. Someone had chosen to keep the fire alive in an otherwise empty room. Nicholas Castellano was standing in front of that fire when she fell. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and built like someone who'd spent decades learning how to break things. His suit was charcoal grey, tailored so precisely that each seam looked like it had been drawn by an architect. His shirt was white and open at the collar. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a pale line that caught the firelight and held it like a question. His hair was dark, shot through with silver at the temples. His eyes were the color of a storm sky, the kind of grey that meant danger. He moved toward her without hesitation. Strong hands reached down, and for a moment Aria's entire body went rigid with fear. Then he was lifting her carefully, gently, carrying her to the couch in front of the fire like she weighed nothing at all. Someone else, a man with a scar on his neck, brought blankets. Someone else took Emma with such care that the child never woke, carrying her to a room nearby and settling her under layers of expensive fabric. Nicholas knelt in front of Aria. His fingers came up and tilted her chin, examining the handprint bruise, the split lip, the way her eyes had gone wide and hollow. His jaw tightened. Something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest. "Who did this to you?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath, like a threat. Aria couldn't answer. Her body had finally surrendered to the cold and the fear and the collapse of every plan she'd ever made. She lost consciousness there in front of the fire, wrapped in blankets that cost more than her monthly rent, saved by hands that had no business being gentle. 2 hours later, in the room adjacent to the fireplace, Nicholas Castellano sat with his men. Enzo was the first to speak. He was 51 years old and had been loyal to Nicholas for 15 years, longer than anyone else in the organization. "Boss, we can't get involved. The feds have been hunting you for 3 weeks. Getting tangled up with a local assault cases." Nicholas pulled out his phone. He showed them the photo that Franco had sent earlier, a school ID picture, a small girl with dark hair and serious eyes. Emma Hartley. Age 7. The girl who had found Luca alone in a parking lot during a blizzard and refused to leave him until help came. Franco's voice came out low and shocked. "That's the kid from the parking lot. The woman who taught her to have that kind of courage is bleeding in my lodge," Nicholas said. "We find out who hurt her. We find out everything." The room fell silent except for the sound of wind howling outside, battering the windows, trying to tear its way in. At 4:22 in the morning, Aria opened her eyes. The fire was still burning. Emma was asleep in an armchair nearby, wrapped in a blanket that looked like it had been spun from gold thread. Someone had cleaned her wounds while she slept. Her split lip had been treated. The handprint bruise on her throat had been carefully bandaged. Her body ached, but not from the cold anymore. Warmth had returned. Safety, or something that felt like it, had been offered. A man sat across from her in a leather chair. Nicholas Castellano was reading a book, one hand holding the pages, his other hand resting on the arm of the chair. The scar on his face caught the firelight. He looked up at the exact moment she became fully conscious, like he'd been waiting for that specific moment. "Who are you?" Aria's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Nicholas Castellano," he said. "You're safe here. Both of you." She knew that name. Everyone in Boston knew that name. Nicholas Castellano was the kind of man you whispered about, the kind of name that made people lower their voices and look over their shoulders. He was power translated into human form. He was danger given a face and a suit and a scar. Her body went rigid. "Yes," Nicholas said, reading her fear like it was written on her skin. "And your daughter saved my son's life 6 hours ago in a parking lot. A boy, alone in a blizzard, and Emma refused to leave him. She sat with him in the snow. She gave him courage when he needed it most." Aria's eyes widened. The pieces shifted. The small boy from the parking lot. The stranger Emma had talked about on the car ride home. The child in the burning lodge. "Tell me who hurt you," Nicholas said. Aria wanted to resist. She wanted to protect herself, to tell him it wasn't his problem, to get up and leave and figure out how to survive this on her own. But her throat was bruised. Her lip was split. She was $5 away from homelessness, and she'd just lost the job she desperately needed. "Douglas Hale," she said. Her voice broke on his name. "The hotel manager. He's been 4 months. Tonight I can't go back. But I need this job. I need the money. I make $85 in 7 days, and that's what keeps Emma in school. That's what keeps us in an apartment. Without it, we have nothing." Nicholas's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something dark. Something that promised consequences. "You won't go back," he said simply. At 6:13 in the morning, in the hotel manager's office, Douglas Hale realized his mistake. Aria wasn't there. She didn't show up for her shift. He called her phone 4 times. No answer. He checked the employee records and found her address, her schedule, her contact information. She was gone. He called Cordelia Blackwood. Cordelia answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and precise. She was 52 years old, silver-haired, dripping in diamonds that caught the light like she was wearing frozen fire. She ran 6 luxury hotels across the Northeast. She had destroyed women like Aria Hartley before, women who thought they could speak, women who thought anyone would listen. She ran, Douglas said into the phone. The Hartley woman. She might talk. Then we make sure she can't, Cordelia said, and her voice was ice. File a missing persons report. Tell them she's unstable. Tell them she took her child in dangerous weather without permission. I'll send the police. The ones I own. Douglas hung up the phone and smiled. He'd been covering his tracks for 3 years. He'd stolen $85,000 from employees through wage theft schemes that Cordelia had authorized. He'd broken for women before Aria. He'd paid them off, made them disappear, erased their complaints from every record that mattered. This would be just another erasure. What he didn't know was that Nicholas Castellano had already made 3 phone calls. Franco discovered Douglas Hale's full history by 7:15 in the morning, for complaints buried, 3 women paid to disappear, a documented pattern of sexual harassment spanning 12 years. Enzo found Cordelia's connection. She owned 6 hotels, and at every single one, the same crimes had been committed by different managers, all using the same system, all reporting to her. But what neither of them could have predicted was the call that came through at 7:56 in the morning. Franco's radio crackled. "Boss," the voice on the other end said, "2 police cars just pulled up to the lodge. Their lights are on. They're coming inside." The wind outside had not stopped. The blizzard had not lessened. And in the guest wing of the mountain lodge, Nicholas Castellano stood and looked at the sleeping child and the woman with the bruised throat, and made a choice that would echo through Boston for months to come. The black door of the mountain lodge shuddered under the force of fists at 7:15 in the morning. 2 police cars sat in the driveway, lights flashing against the snow, their red and blue glow cutting through the gray dawn like a blade wrapped in ice. Officer Chen stood at the threshold, his uniform pressed, his badge catching the winter light. Behind him, Officer Morrison shifted his weight, one hand resting near his belt. Their eyes were cold. Professional. The kind of cold that came from taking money to forget what they'd seen. Nicholas Castellano appeared in the doorway before they could knock again. 6'3", shoulders filling the frame, dark hair swept back from a forehead that bore the weight of empires. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, casual in a way that made the officers understand immediately that they had entered the presence of something dangerous. "Good morning, officers," Nicholas said. His voice moved through the air like a blade through silk. "It's early. Snow still coming down hard." Chen cleared his throat. "We have a report. Missing child. Aria Hartley took her daughter in dangerous weather without permission. We need to bring her in for questioning." "She's here," Nicholas said. "She's safe." "That doesn't matter," Morrison said. His hand drifted closer to his weapon. "We have legal authority to." "You have nothing," Nicholas interrupted. The words fell like stones. "Miss Hartley and her daughter are not missing. They are not in danger. And they won't be going anywhere with you." From the shadows behind Nicholas, 2 figures emerged. Enzo first, broad-shouldered, a gun visible in his shoulder holster. Then Franco, taller, his eyes tracking the officers with the precision of a man who had hurt people for a living. Neither man moved. Neither man needed to. Chen's jaw tightened. "You can't obstruct. You're trespassing," Nicholas said. "On private property." During a blizzard. With a missing persons report that has no merit. He stepped forward slightly, and the officers stepped back. Leave. Now. Morrison's hand closed around his weapon's grip. Enzo's palm moved to the grip of his gun. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Stand down, Chen said quietly. Morrison's hand fell away. We'll be back, Chen said, backing toward the door. With a warrant. Good, Nicholas said. Bring whatever you need to bring. But understand that everything you're doing has already been documented. And everyone will know about it. The officers left. The door closed. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Aria stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching the police cars descend the mountain road. Her reflection floated in the window glass beside her, a ghost of a woman with one eye swollen shut, bruises darkening across her throat like accusations. The blizzard howled against the panes, wind screaming like something trapped. She gripped the windowsill until her knuckles went white. What had she been thinking? Nicholas Castellano was a criminal. Everyone knew it. And now she'd drawn the police to him. And they would come back. With warrants. With more officers. With rage. Douglas and Cordelia had money that moved mountains. They had people on payroll. They had the law wearing their faces. And she had $5 in her pocket. That was all. $5. No job. No car. No future that didn't end with Douglas's hands around her throat again, squeezing until she stopped making sound, stopped being a problem. She could run. Take Emma into the white fury of the storm. But they wouldn't make it 50 yards before the cold stopped their hearts. The thermometer outside read 14 degrees. With wind chill, it was below zero. A 7-year-old girl wouldn't survive an hour. She could surrender. Walk down the stairs right now, pack their things, go back to the motel where Douglas would be waiting. Maybe if she didn't fight anymore, if she just accepted what was happening, it would be faster. Less painful. She'd heard stories about people who gave up. They said it was peaceful. The cold seeped through the window glass. Her fingers went numb. On the side table, Nicholas had left a prayer card. Worn, creased, the edges soft from being held 1,000 times. Words in Italian she couldn't read, but underneath, someone had written in broken English, for when the dark is too much. When the light is too far. Emma appeared beside her. Small. Barefoot in the cold air. Her hand found Aria's with the certainty of a child who had learned that contact was survival. Mommy, are we safe now? Emma whispered. Aria knelt. Pulled her daughter against her chest. Felt the fragile bird bones of her shoulders, the beating of her heart that depended entirely on choices Aria made. And in that moment, something hardened. Something that had been breaking for 7 years locked into place. She would not run. She would not surrender. She would burn the whole world down before she let it take Emma. Nicholas was on the phone before the police cars reached the bottom of the mountain. His voice was steady. Lethal. Franco, he said. Call Marcus Quinn. Enzo, standing by the fireplace, understood immediately. Marcus Quinn was an FBI agent. Federal Bureau of Investigation. And Nicholas Castellano had leverage over him from a deal made 5 years ago, something involving a shipment that never reached its destination, something that had saved Quinn's daughter from a kidnapper's hands. Quinn owed Nicholas Castellano a debt that couldn't be paid with money. The phone rang through to Quinn's personal line at 7:22 in the morning. Castellano, Quinn said. Not a question. A statement. You never call. I'm offering you a trade, Nicholas said. Everything on Cordelia Blackwood. Wage theft across 6 hotels. $85,000. Documents. Names of every official she bought. Officer Chen. Officer Morrison. Everyone. In exchange, you protect a woman and her child. Silence. Then, what woman? Aria Hartley. Hotel employee. Cordelia and Douglas Hale have been destroying her. I want federal protection. Real protection. And I want every piece of evidence you need to end them both. What evidence? Quinn's voice had changed. It was hungry now. Franco, Nicholas said. Send him everything. The transfers went out at 7:24 in the morning. Wire transfer records. Employee complaints from 7 years. Wage theft documentation totaling $85,000 across 6 hotels. Photographs of bribe payments. Names. Dates. Amounts. Evidence that would take Cordelia Blackwood apart piece by piece. Quinn called back at 7:31. We're moving now, he said. Raid at 9:47. Both locations. Douglas first. Then Cordelia. Nicholas hung up the phone and looked at the prayer card on the table. The one he'd left when he was still a man who prayed. Douglas Hale arrived at the lodge at 9:31 in the morning, driving his own car, moving with the confidence of a man who believed the world bent to his will. He was 53 years old, his face the color of raw meat from rage, his hand shaking as he grabbed the front door and yanked it open. Aria, he screamed. Aria, get down here. Nicholas was waiting in the great room. He stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel, his posture the kind of casual that only comes with the absolute certainty of power. When Douglas saw him, he stopped. Something in his mind recalibrated. Something recognized danger. Who the hell are you? Douglas demanded. Where is she? That woman is my employee. She stole hotel property. She. You put your hands on her, Nicholas said. His voice was quiet. It was worse than shouting. Left bruises on her throat. That was your last mistake. Douglas tried to laugh. It came out broken. She's nobody. A waitress. Who's going to believe her over me? I have connections. Cordelia owns this territory. The police work for us. You can't. I believe her, Nicholas interrupted. And you're going to pay for every mark you left. Douglas backed toward the door. His hand fumbled for his phone. Before he could reach it, the front door exploded inward. 12 federal agents in tactical gear flooded the lodge at 9:11 in the morning. Their weapons were drawn. Their faces were fixed. Marcus Quinn stepped through first, his badge displayed, his eyes locked on Douglas Hale with the kind of satisfaction that came from understanding that this moment had been prepared for years. Douglas Hale, Quinn said, his voice filling the room, you're under arrest for wage theft, sexual assault, conspiracy, and bribery of public officials. Douglas collapsed to his knees. He was trembling. His expensive suit suddenly looked like costume fabric. His hands shook as agents grabbed his wrists and twisted them behind his back. Wait, he gasped. Wait, I can explain. This is a mistake. I can pay. I can? The handcuffs locked around his wrists with a sound like a door slamming shut. They dragged him out of the lodge. Outside, news vans were already arriving, their cameras catching every second as Douglas Hale was thrown into the back of a federal vehicle, his screams muffled by the blizzard. At the same moment, 40 blocks away in downtown Boston, federal agents were crashing through the penthouse doors of Cordelia Blackwood's apartment. She was in a silk robe, pearl gray, the kind that cost more than Aria's annual rent. Coffee was in her hand. Her diamonds caught the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This is outrageous, she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. Do you know who I am? I'll have your badges. I'll have your careers. Agent Rivera stepped forward, her badge held steady. Cordelia Blackwood, you're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, wage theft, and obstruction of justice across a criminal conspiracy spanning 6 years. Cordelia's face went white. Her coffee cup fell. It shattered against the marble floor, the liquid spreading like spilled blood. They led her out in handcuffs, her diamonds still glittering on her wrists, her robe still perfect, her appearance immaculate. But something had broken inside her. Something that would never be repaired. Her staff watched as she was led past them. News cameras in the lobby caught every second. Her photograph was on every screen within the hour. By noon, banks were freezing her accounts. Hotel investors were pulling out. Her empire was collapsing in real time, dissolving like sand. Federal prison. 40 years for each of them. Neither would see freedom again. Nicholas stood in the lodge as federal agents cleared out around him. Marcus Quinn approached, moving slowly, his hand open, his weapon holstered. Two men who understood each other without words. "We're square," Quinn said. "Your debt is paid. But you're still wanted." Nicholas nodded. He had known this would be the price. "The woman and child," Quinn said. "They're clear. Protective custody if they want it. New names. New city. New life. Everything." "Ask them," Nicholas said. Quinn left. The lodge fell silent except for the wind still howling against the windows. Upstairs, Aria stood at that same window, watching the federal vehicles descend the mountain. Watching the snow begin to slow. Watching the sky begin to crack open. And she understood that she was no longer nobody. The fire in the great room crackled against the approaching dawn, the logs collapsing into embers the color of dying stars. Aria stood in the doorway, watching Nicholas fold a black duffel bag with the precision of a man who had packed in darkness 1,000 times before. His movements were efficient, deliberate, each item placed with military exactness. The prayer card sat on the mahogany table beside him, worn at the edges, the ink faded from decades of handling. She did not announce herself. She simply walked across the hardwood floor, her bare feet making no sound against the wood, and when she spoke, her voice barely cracked the silence. "You're running." Nicholas did not look up. His hands continued their work, folding a black sweater, rolling it tight like a scroll. "It's what I do." "You saved us," Aria said. Her voice trembled like a candle in the wind, but beneath the tremor was something harder, something shaped by 3 days of watching a man sacrifice everything. "Douglas is in prison. Cordelia's empire is destroyed. Emma and I are free because of you." Only then did Nicholas turn. His storm-grey eyes met hers, and in that moment she saw not the Mafia boss but the man beneath, exhausted, hunted, carrying the weight of his own betrayal like a scar he could not hide. The scar that ran from his eye to his cheekbone seemed darker in the dawnlight, like a blade had once tried to split him open. "You saved my son first," he said, his voice rough like gravel pulled from a riverbed. "A little boy giving a rescue signal in a parking lot during a blizzard, and your daughter refused to leave him. That changed everything." Aria stepped closer. The lodge was so quiet she could hear the wall clock ticking in the kitchen, each second marking time that was running out. "Then let me help you now. The FBI agent, Quinn, he said you gave them everything. Cooperate. Testify against the people your brother was working with. Don't run." A bitter laugh escaped him, the sound like a blade wrapped in ice. "My own brother sold me to federal agents. You think the feds will protect me? You think a badge and a promise means anything in this world? I think you protected us when you didn't have to," Aria said. She pulled the worn prayer card from her pocket. She had found it on the table 3 nights ago and kept it close like a talisman. "I think you chose us over running 3 days ago when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I think you're tired of the darkness, Nicholas. I think you want out." She held the card toward him. The edges were soft, almost liquid from so many years of being held by trembling hands. His mother's handwriting, he had told her. A prayer taught to him before she died. "What does this say?" Aria whispered. Nicholas took the card. His fingers traced the words like they were sacred, like touching them might bring her back. "It's a prayer my mother taught me. For protection. For redemption." His voice cracked slightly. I haven't deserved either. Then let me be the hand reaching back, Aria said. The bruises on her throat had faded to pale yellow, shaped like a man's fingers, shaped like violence that was finally behind her. You saved us on the worst night of our lives. Let us save you on yours. The lodge held its breath. Even the fire seemed to pause, the flames suspended between one moment and the next. Then Emma appeared in the doorway, small and impossibly brave for a 7-year-old who had been through a darkness no child should ever know. She ran to Nicholas without hesitation, wrapped her thin arms around his leg, held on like she could keep him anchored to this place, to this moment, to them. Are you leaving? Emma asked. Her voice was small but steady. You didn't say goodbye to Luca. Children, the narrator knew, were the truest compass. They saw past deception and fear straight to the truth of a person's heart. Nicholas knelt to Emma's level. His hand came up to touch her hair, a gesture of such gentleness that Aria felt something inside her fracture and reform. I was going to, he said. I was going to say goodbye. Don't go, Emma said. Not a question. A statement of fact as simple and devastating as a child could make it. We need you. Something broke inside Nicholas then. Not a shattering, but a fracture, a crack in the fortress he had built around himself over 20 years of blood and empire. He looked at Aria, this woman who had nothing, who had counted $5 like it was all the money in the world, who had been beaten and broken and still offered him redemption, and his eyes glistened in the pale light. Okay, he said to Emma. Okay. I won't go. He stood, still holding the prayer card, and pulled out his phone. His hands were steady now, or perhaps he had simply made peace with the trembling. He dialed. When Marcus Quinn answered, Nicholas spoke with a voice like thunder, like an oath made in the presence of witnesses. I want to make a deal, he said. Full cooperation. Everything I know about the organization, the corruption, the network. The names, the accounts, the operations. All of it. In exchange for witness protection for me and my son. Silence on the other end of the line. Then Quinn's voice, careful and precise. You'll testify. Against everyone, Nicholas said. Including what my brother did. Every detail. Every crime. I'll send the paperwork, Quinn said. When Nicholas hung up, the sun was breaking across the horizon in shades of orange and gold. Aria felt something in her chest unfurl like a flower opening to light after too long in shadow. The wind had stopped. The blizzard had passed. The sky, finally, was beginning to clear. That night, they sat by the fireplace as the logs burned down to nothing, as darkness gave way to the warmth of flames. Both of them broken. Both of them survivors. The bond between them was undeniable but fragile, like something made of glass, like something that could shatter if held too tightly. What will you do now? Nicholas asked. He sat in the leather chair across from her, the prayer card folded carefully in his pocket, close to his heart. Aria curled her legs beneath her on the sofa. The fading bruises on her throat had turned the color of old photographs, fading into the past. The FBI said I'll get restitution from Cordelia's seized assets. Approximately $47,000. Emma and I can start over. Maybe I'll finish the nursing degree I started before. She trailed off. Before you had to survive, Nicholas finished. Aria nodded. You'll make it, Nicholas said. His voice carried a certainty that made it sound like truth. You're stronger than anyone I've met in 15 years of this life. Stronger than men who carry guns. Stronger than men who command armies. Aria allowed herself a small smile despite the fading bruises, despite the road ahead still being uncertain. You're not who I thought you'd be. Neither are you, Nicholas said. The fire crackled. The clock in the kitchen ticked. And somewhere in the rooms above them, 2 children slept, unaware that 2 broken people had just pulled each other back from the edge of their own destruction. 6 months later, sunlight streamed through the windows of a small Boston apartment, falling in clean lines across hardwood floors that Aria had learned to keep spotless. Emma sat at the kitchen table doing homework, pencil in hand, her concentration absolute. Aria arrived home from her nursing program clinical rotation wearing scrubs that no longer hung loose on her frame. She had gained weight. She had gained color. She had gained back the parts of herself that violence had taken. Her phone rang as she set her bag down. Nicholas. They spoke every Sunday evening, both in witness protection programs now, different cities, different names for different lives, but connected by the night that had transformed everything. How was clinical? His voice came through the speaker, steady and warm. Exhausting, Aria said. Amazing. I helped deliver a baby today. A girl. Born at 11:11 in the evening, screaming her lungs out, and her mother was crying, and I was there. Her voice caught slightly. I was there helping bring life into the world instead of drowning in death. Your daughter would be proud, Nicholas said, and in those words Aria heard something she had not expected, genuine pride, genuine hope. Emma looked up from her homework. That's Mr. Nicholas. Yes, sweetheart, Aria said. Tell him I helped that boy, Emma said. Tell him I'm glad I didn't leave Luca in the parking lot. Aria relayed the message. She heard Nicholas breathe deeply on the other end, heard the sound of him composing himself. Tell her that he hasn't forgotten her. Tell her that every day, he asks about her. Tell her that she changed everything. After they hung up, Aria walked to the wall where she had framed the $5 bill, the last money she had possessed on the night that everything broke open. The bill was worn, nearly translucent in places, a map of her survival. She stood before it and understood that this was no longer who she was. This was who she had been. The moral settled over her like snow, gentle and inevitable. Aria had possessed $5 and a daughter who refused to walk away from a child in danger. Nicholas had possessed an empire crumbling and enemies closing in from every direction. But on one frozen night in a mountain lodge, a little boy's rescue signal connected two broken people who saved each other from the darkness. Douglas Hale received 40 years in federal prison, led out in handcuffs on every news channel while officers held his arms steady. Cordelia Blackwood lost everything, her empire dissolved, her freedom taken, her name erased from the register of the living world. Justice came not through violence but through the courage of a woman who counted pennies and a man who chose redemption over revenge. One act of compassion by a 7-year-old created a chain reaction that destroyed corruption and built something new from the ashes. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. If this story moved your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about the moment everything changes. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been saved by a stranger's kindness? Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness.